All right, let's start. Satellites versus cables. Will new satellites end the dominance of submarine cables? So we first looked at this, we looked at this several times. Most recently, it was in New Orleans in 2019, and we concluded that it was busted. But that satellites do have an important role to play in complementing submarine cables. But a lot really has changed in just the last 6 years. This is a really interesting graphic that grabbed my attention from Starlink's most recent annual report. And it goes to the end of 2024, maybe the very beginning. And it's showing how much capacity they put into space on their satellites. Look at that line climbing up. And you know Elon Musk does own a majority of Starlink. And he says a lot of outrageous things. And he does kind of have a, let's be honest, sort of a huckster attitude that many of us kind of tune out. But in this case, for sure, the gains have been really impressive. Not only have they made these gains through sheer volume, they've put up over 8,600 satellites in space. They've done it through some pretty impressive technological gains on each satellite. They improved on their version 1 satellite with a V1.5 that came out in 2021. That allowed them for 24 gigabits per second of total capacity. Then a couple years later, they came out with their V2 satellite that individually has 96 gigabits total capacity. And finally, they have finalized design for their V3 satellite, which they think will offer a total of a terabit per second capacity per satellite. Now, they had been planning on launching that in 2025. My understanding is that they were waiting on the Starship launch vehicle to launch it, and that's having some technical difficulties. So the V3 satellites are not up, but they've achieved these gains just through a mix of V1, 1.5, and 2. So I was really curious about what that number really means, because have you seen annual reports where there's just sort of a number going up, they never explain their methodology? It kind of drives me crazy. So I found a really cool site that tracks every single launch and how many satellites went up in every launch, and was able to reverse engineer this chart. And it turns out what they're actually showing is their total launch, not net operational satellites, the total launched. But even so, it's really impressive. And it's gone well beyond what their annual report was showing. That showed 350 terabits per second at the end of 2024. Now we are at around 500 terabits per second from the Starlink constellation. It's impressive. However, some launches have failed, but more importantly, for a LEO satellite system, after a while they fall out of orbit. They've deorbited. So this chart shows how much is actually still in orbit. Still very impressive. But here's a critical observation. I realized that they were actually showing downlink capacity. But the system is designed completely asymmetrically, almost to 10-to-1 downlink to uplink. So if you want to look at their uplink capacity, that's what we're looking at here. So keep this one in mind. We're going to come back to it in a minute. What I want to look at is cost per bit analysis of satellites, because our question is, will cables or satellites supplant cables? And by the way, there are a lot of other LEO systems out there. I'm just looking at Starlink because it's the one that has the most mature business plan. Okay. First of all, we have to acknowledge this is a little bit silly because it's an apples to oranges comparison. Cables are strictly point-to-point, and satellite systems, especially like Starlink, are analogous to an end-user network. They're multi-point to multi-point, really. That's how they're optimized. However, let's put that aside for a moment. I want to acknowledge in the setup of our methodology a few problems for Starlink. One, they're extremely constrained for actually point-to-point capacity. They use spectrum, and they are constrained on spectrum. My understanding is they're only allowed to point a single beam at a point. So even once they get a V3 satellite up, if I'm understanding this correctly, you're talking about a max of 1 terabit per second at a point to another point. So that's a fraction of one fiber pair, which is a fraction of a cable, which is a fraction of our industry. So from the very beginning, this is a little bit problematic. Also on OpEx, how much annual OpEx do you have to operate a cable? It's probably in the low millions, I would say. That's a pretty good estimate. OpEx on Starlink estimated last year over $2 billion. And finally, here's the really big problem. Cables designed for 25 years can go well beyond. Once a satellite's put up in orbit, it's basically immediately falling down. You know, there's gravity that you have to fight with. They are made to last 5 years, after which they're deorbited, or their orbit would decay anyway. However, what we're going to do is ignore these problems. The individual you see there jumping for joy is Elon Musk. I believe he was literally jumping for joy at a rally of his favorite presidential candidate last year. But let's pretend he's just happy that he doesn't have to deal with these problems. And I want to acknowledge, we're really comparing apples to oranges. This is a silly sort of thing to do. It's kind of a fool's errand, but this is Mythbusters. We kind of want to be a little bit foolish. So let's start with the comparison. A fully laden submarine cable, state of the art. I'm estimating with construction costs, and you light up every single fiber, let's say it's 24 fiber pairs, around $500 million. That's a single cable. Starlink constellation, a conservative estimate for a 5-year spend for them is $15 billion. Elon Musk a few years ago said he thought it would end up being $20 to $30 billion, and for once, I didn't think he was exaggerating. But we're going to be conservative with our estimates in a number of ways for Starlink, because we're in the submarine cable industry. I don't want to be accused of bias. Okay, how much bandwidth can they contain? The submarine cable, 480 terabits per second. Right now, fully operational. Downlink for Starlink is 455, so that's pretty close. However, we want to look at symmetric bandwidth. You know, a cable, after all, we talk about fiber pairs. It's fully symmetric. But Starlink constellation is constrained by how much they can get up, not just down. So we're looking at their uplink capacity. That's 50 terabits per second. Next, there's a concept called the efficiency ratio. There are a number of things that constrain what is maximally possible on a LEO satellite constellation. Here's just one example. The Earth is 2/3 water, and hardly anyone lives over the water. They live on land. So that takes down how much capacity the constellation can be used at any one point by 66% already. Quilty Research, who I really recommend as an expert in the satellite space, estimates that the Starlink constellation at any one point in time, their efficiency ratio is between 5 and 10%. So again, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to Starlink and put them at 10%. But 50 times 10% is 5. So now we're at 480 versus 5. What's that work out to? A lifetime cost per megabit? About $1 for the submarine cable, $1 per meg, and around $3,000 for Starlink. So that's a 2,800 to 1 ratio. So on a cost per bit ratio, they're still, even after the fantastic gains of satellites, they're still nowhere near cables. Okay, but let's pretend for a moment that money is no object, and we can also smash as many beams as we can. Let's say we go fully to free space optics, which I think is unregulated bandwidth, and it's possible to do all of that. So how many satellite systems would we need to get up to the cables? Okay, so this is the chart I just showed a few moments ago. This is the exact same chart, but it's on a different scale because I need to make room for cables. And that's what we see here. This is telegeography's estimate of how much cable capacity has been purchased over the past few years. So again, a reminder, to get them equal, we need to get this red line up to the green. And not only that, we know there's going to be a lot of growth in the cable industry or the international bandwidth industry in the next few years. If you want to get some more details on this, make sure you come to this room tomorrow afternoon where Alan is presenting with Mike Constable on some of our forecasts for cable kilometers and what that means for marine maintenance. But it doesn't appear possible to me that satellites is anywhere near capable of taking over the role of cables. So this one, I think we can pretty much definitively rule as busted. But what of Starlink as an access replacement for mobile phones or fixed broadband? Well, if you can see the red there, that's how many subscribers they have now. Now, it's extremely useful in certain places where it's difficult to get cable or fiber optic capacity. There are a lot of other applications that satellites render that fiber optic cable simply can never catch up to. And in certain backup situations, redundancy, satellites can play a really critical role for users of submarine cables that have more limited capacity needs. But will they end the dominance of submarine cables? There's no way, come on, that is ridiculous. So this one is busted.